Привет всем! Welcome to this video. We're going to be looking at building this Trumpeter kit of the T-72 BB1. I'm going to change the format of this video. I'm not going to show you everything. There's no need. All we're doing is gluing plastic to plastic. However, there are some factors on this kit that I like to explain. Mainly just the sheer number of parts and how to organize them. And then I'm going to show you a few construction tips that will not only be applicable to this model, but may help you in your own projects and should certainly help you if you're building this one. First things first, I think I'll just show you a general layout of where I am at the moment. There are lots and lots of sprues, and actually the very first thing I've done is actually just got my Sharpie out and I've marked up some of the sprues that I will need. Not all of them. When I've got multiples, like I've got 4 off of these, I know which sprue that is. But generally, I've got them sort of arranged around me, so I'm not constantly hunting for the parts as I work my way through. The next thing I think I'm going to talk about is the sequencing, the construction methodology that I'm using. If you've seen my previous videos, this will be quite familiar to you. If you're at the level where you're moving up from beginner to advanced, or rather beginner to intermediate, intermediate to advanced, this might help you in terms of how you approach these more complex kits. So let's talk about the instructions, or as I prefer to call them, part location diagrams. The sequencing leads from stage 1 up all the way through over 23 pages, 44 steps, quite a lot of stuff to do, and as we know, many parts. If you break them down to modules, there's really only 2. There's the turret and then there's the hull. You can subdivide the hull into the fender assemblies, upper hull, lower hull, running gear, etc. But that's basically about it. Am I following the instructions to the letter? No, of course not. Why not? That is probably more important, okay? In particular on this model, we've got many small detailed parts. In particular, these ERA blocks, they are individual, as in you haven't got clumps of them. You have to glue every single ERA block into position where it belongs, yeah? And here you can see where I've got up to. Now, the principal thing with the sequencing is that what it does, it leads you down the step of building the lower hull. Then all of a sudden, you're taking this plate here and adding all the detail onto it, every single part, including photo etch. Then you take parts of the rear hull, add all the detail, and only at this step here do we have the assembly. Now, principally, this is where things can go wrong. What you should be doing really is ensuring the test fit of these parts onto the hull itself to check for gaps and joins or any problems, including fit issues, prior to putting all your details onto this, onto all the detailed parts onto parts of the glasses plate, etc. Now, as you can see, I have added on the ERA blocks. I'll cover that in a second. I'll tell you why. But I haven't added on the light guards. I haven't added on any delicate assemblies. And that is really what I'm talking about. Delicate assemblies, why? Well, when it comes to this construction stage here, if we've got any fit issues, if we need to sand, if we need to manipulate the parts, we're going to have to handle this quite a lot. And that is where you've got a good chance of breaking off all the parts or some of the delicate parts that you've previously glued into place onto these parts, yeah? And simply, the fact is that we can work out which parts go on first, because it doesn't give you like these instructions. Sometimes you'll see them on Tamiya's, etc., where they sort of label out, put this one on first, then this, then that. Well, it leads at the sort of conclusion that you glue this on first, and then these parts in whichever sequence, yeah? Now, there may or may not be issues, and I'll tell you that there will be issues if you follow that exact sequence, if you don't dry fit. So really, I think the thing that I'm trying to express most of all is that it's a really good idea to check the fit of the major component parts prior to adding in all that detail. The reason being that when it comes to these, the principal assembly steps, you do not want to have joins, you do not want to have gaps, etc. And you want to understand how the parts work with one another, especially when there's 3 parts or 4 parts making up that upper hull portion. So that is the sequence that I use, and that's what I recommend to you on builds that have got of a similar nature. Usually you haven't got this situation, I must admit. Usually got a one-piece hull that fits on, but even in that case, you may have to be flexing the parts, adding in filler, sanding, whatever, and it's just a lot easier if you place these parts into position and get them glued in firm and then add the detail onto them. There's much less chance of breaking off the small details, and you're going to have a much, you haven't got any interference. If you've got small details that encroach on joins, etc., you can avoid that situation as well. So this is just my sequencing. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm jumping all over the place at the moment. So I'm looking at how all the other parts that make up this hull join together. Yeah, so I want to understand if there's going to be any major issues. I can tell you straightforwardly, there won't be. I built this hull previously, as I said, on a T-90 kit, and I know that the fit is really good. But still, I use the same approach. It's something I feel happy about. Now, let me talk quickly about these ERA blocks, of which there are many, many, many. And as you can see on here, I've already added these on, and this is contrary to what I've been saying. But the reason is, it's the placement of these blocks is a little bit tricky. You have to look at the kit from many, many different angles in order to get these to join. The thing to note is, do not drill out holes for placement of the ERA blocks. All that there are is lightly scribed onto the plastic are little positioning location marks, and the actual ERA blocks, you can see they sit with a gap. They sit proud of the actual surface as they do on the real vehicle. So positioning them is a little bit tricky. You can see that they're not all exactly in line. I kind of like that look. And to be honest, well, it would have been a lot easier if they had them in larger blocks, but they don't. They are all individual blocks that you need to fit into position. And to further complicate things as well, they are different styles of blocks as well. As you can see, some of them have a inclined surface and some of them are flat, and some of them are made of 2 components. The other point to note as well that is not shown in the instructions is the orientation. Yes, there is an orientation on these blocks. I'm going to try and point this out to you. If you have a look, let me just zoom in. Right, let's have a look at this. On this block here, you can see there's a difference between the bottom and the top. That is the correct orientation. And it does actually show that on the instructions. Do you notice that or not? Well, be careful. Just have a look at all the instructions. The instructions are accurate and correct in terms of placement of the parts. So just bear that in mind. Now, it's a lot of work to do this. I have to admit that, yeah, they could have maybe approached this a little bit differently. However, they haven't. And, well, all I can say is just take your time, enjoy the process, and get building. So that's my sort of first update. I'm not going to go into, for once, like gluing bits of plastic to bits of plastic. That is really straightforward. Instead, we'll come back on any other issues that we might encounter, maybe on the turret, maybe on the side skirts, and also I'm going to talk a little bit further about this sequencing, as in we're going to actually use the supply tracks. The supply tracks are individual links. They all need to be glued together. When do I do that? When do I join on side skirts? Let's talk about that in the next part of the video. Okay, here we are. We're on at this point doing the tracks. Jesus, okay, there's no point beating around the bush. This is boring, okay? These are not fun to make, but they are good, okay? We're talking about the individual track links that are actually on a sprue. And points to note is these are not clicked together at all whatsoever. They all need to be cemented. You've got a little diagram here. It indicates there's 95 links required per side. So that's quite a lot of parts to separate from the sprues. I'm going to show you how to do that as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we need to get them wrapped around the track, the actual running gear as well. Points to note, on this tank, on this example, we've got side skirts, and that's a little bit of a get out. So we only need to maybe go up to about there and there, so we just can avoid the top run, because you just won't see it anyways. First part of this tutorial is getting these links out really quick. First point to note, of course, just clip them out one by one by one by one. If you want to do it quickly, like as in sort of like a factory production type method, this is the way that I do it, okay? We only need 2 tools. I use a pretty coarse sanding stick, I'll tell you why, and a pretty good pair of side sprue cutters, you know, the nice flat edge. Instead of clipping these off one by one, I'm going to show you how I do this. The first thing I do is I go around one side. I try and get these the cutters as close up to the side as possible, and then I go all the way around, okay? Right, basically what I'm going to do is try and expose the surfaces that need sanding to quicken up the sanding as quickly as possible. So what I do is one side there, so I've done that entire side across that side. Now I want to get an entire tree off of here. So what I'm going to do is clip there, clip there, clip there, and finally clip there. And now we're going to separate out this form from here. So again, close up to the edge, and so on. Sorry if this is putting you to sleep. Have I missed any? Yes, I have. There we go. Right, there, this is what we do. So we take out the forms like so, and you repeat that, of course. You get another section like that. From this point on now, why have I done this? Why have I got a more coarse sanding stick? It's just a load quicker when they're still attached to very quickly, using the coarse side, just quickly go across the tops, taking off that sprue burr. You need these flush. And of course you repeat on the other side. And unfortunately that is about as quick as I can get it. Yeah, it is quicker to do it like that. But then at this point, of course, we would take off the individual links, and then we need to individually sand these. But that is just a quicker way of doing it, what I found anyways. Now let's go on to the construction of the tracks. Okay, so I've got all my links cut out. Those are all sanded smooth. What I've done is I've placed on the running gear. In this case, these have got poly caps, so you can take these on and off. And of course the idler as well is just on loosely. And of course we need this shape here to determine the run of the tracks, yeah? And as I said, we're going to go from about that point there all the way down and across to here. Now what I like to do is start off on this flat run here to here. And of course what you've done previously, you've checked all your alignments, you've made sure that these are true, flush, etc. And so how do we assemble these quickly? I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, first thing to have is some double-sided sticky tape, which is just slightly less than the width of a piece of track. It'll just help. It'll help with lining it up, okay? I place down a strip down here. Maybe you can just see it reflecting. And here you can see a run that I prepared earlier. How do you do this? Really, really easily. Get your the chassis down here, then get a pen, and with a pen, what you're doing, you're marking from the center point of that wheel, because that is going to be the extreme, that's going to be the flat run, there to there. So now we know the first length, the first run, which is going to be totally flat. Next thing to do, as you can probably guess, is just simply stick down the individual track links one by one. As I said, these have got no pins or connectors. The only way that these can be assembled is with cement. So I've already got a run prepared here, and now, as you can guess, we need our extra thin cement. The thing here to be is just be using sparing amounts of cement. You only want to run it into the contact points, yeah? If you flood these, like absolutely flood it, what will happen is that the glue will seep down underneath and it will actually sort of distort or create a bit of a mess on the portion of the track that you would see. So that's my first run, and we'll construct that and then I'll just come back to you. We're going to do 2 sections of flat runs again between this point here, the center of this foremost road wheel up to the idler, just to that connection there. That should be straight and taut, and also between here, the rearmost road wheel and the drive sprocket. Instead of me just repeating what I've sort of already laid out, I'll just tell you how it was measured, which was pretty straightforward. Just basically place down the hull of the tank, and I'll just sort of demonstrate it over here. All you would do is lay down and just mark from the center there to about there. And as you can see, I've already done that on this section here. I've marked that out as right side forward, so forward as in the tank is facing forward, this being the right side. And also make sure, of course, that your links are going to join up correctly, that they're facing the right direction in terms of the track runs, yeah? So I'll just show you that. That is that section there, and it is repeated towards the rear. On the rear, you might want to be a little bit shorter. You have got adjustment because, of course, this drive sprocket is rotatable, because you need to engage those teeth into these into the track links itself. So what you want to do now is just let these totally cure off. Leave them for a good, like 3-4 hours, I would say, because these parts are flat. They don't require any adjustment. Okay, next stage. If I didn't emphasize it before, I'm going to emphasize it now. Make sure you let these dry. And you probably worked things out already. What are we building? We're building our own link and length tracks. Okay, so what we're going to do is start attaching on these lengths. And I marked these up, obviously, because I measured them out, but they're basically the same. I think they're the same length, in any opinion. So all that needs to happen here is that we cement these lengths in place at the right angle. So we'll do that now, and then we'll let the glue dry and set, and then we'll do the construction of the links, as I mentioned previously. Okay, these larger lengths are now set, and now we're going to construct this part, show you how to do that. As you can see, all we're doing is repeating the process of joining together these little links on the double-sided tape. Get as many as you want, and definitely enough to wrap around the sprocket and the idler. And of course, apply our liquid cement. The only difference with this is that we're not going to let this go off. What we're going to do is let this dry only for a period of about 10 minutes. It will still have enough flexibility to wrap around those circular components. Okay, I'll let that set for a couple of minutes. We'll attach this piece on, make this glue point here. And again, just let this set just for a couple of minutes. Now to form the curve, all we do, place this in position, wrap it round, and either you can hold it, or again, as I suggest, you may use a piece of tape to get the correct curve, and you don't need to hold it like that. Now let's form the one around the drive sprocket. Again, repeating the same procedure. Of course, we need to engage the teeth of the drive sprocket, and we can just simply curl that round, simply curl it round the drive sprocket. When you've got them in the position, just make sure that you're happy with the alignment and that everything looks okay. And then you're done. Okay, the final thing that I did is, as you can see, I added in just a few more lengths here. That's just to cover the portion that you might see through the gap at the back of the vehicle, through the fenders. And as you can see here as well, I've test fitted on a fender as well, just to see how everything looks. Of course, if you look underneath, you will see that the track's missing. So it's entirely your choice if you wish to complete the track run. In my case, because maybe I'm a lazy modeler, I'm not going to do so. So let's just pop this track off of here now. Remember, everything's polycapped, so now we can go on to the painting stage. Also, I need to add at this stage as well, you have got options as well with this. In our case, we're going to paint the track separately. Now, if you chose to paint everything in situ, and I'm probably going to demonstrate it in the future, in that case, you would actually glue on the track solidly onto the running gear, and that way it looks actually better because it's got more positive contact, i.e. the track is really firmly pressed underneath there. That's kind of important as well, and we'll just cover that briefly when it comes to that assembly. So I'm going to take off all this running gear, and in terms of the paint job for here, I'm going to do something that, you know, is optional. I mean, let's say you're going to go for heavy weathering. Maybe it's not exactly essential to paint all this accurately. And again, I think I should demonstrate that on another model. But in this case, we're going to pop everything off. We're going to try and paint everything pretty accurately underneath here, and then we can go towards the more assembly. Okay, let's start painting, or more accurately, priming. We're going to start off with the black, and we're going to hit the area underneath here, sort of cover up all this with paint. And also, just as a bit of an insurance policy, we'll do underneath the fenders, just on the slight chance that you might see some light coloured plastic from some certain angle. I don't think so anyways. And then, of course, for the tracks, as I like to do, 2 jobs in 1 stone. I like to use a mixture of the mahogany brown with the black, which I've got like mixed together in here. And we'll hit these, which will create a base coat and a primer for the tracks. Sit back, relax, and listen to the free music. Okay, just a little brief summary. You saw everything in the little clip. Anyways, just the start of weathering here. The weathering will be in the next video. We're just covering up to base painting. The idea was to sort of lay in some rust using some acrylics, just give it that correct tone. Now we can place on the fenders and also assemble the rear deck. I better just show you something now. The turret is mostly done, but I'll come towards this in another little recap just in a second. But the thing I was going to mainly mention was this thing of moving away from the instructions. So basically doing the tracks at this stage a lot easier. Actually, it would be impossible nearly to do them with these fenders in place. And I think that's the reason that, you know, workable tracks have become so popular. It allows you to place them at the last moment. But these are a really good fit. They work out really well. Got a nice solid demarcation between the rubber portion of the wheel and the actual metal wheel as well. So I'm quite happy with that. Anyways, let's go towards just basically getting this thing together, and then we'll have another recap in a second. Okay, construction's complete. I'll just go through a brief summary. Probably some of this I've already mentioned before. I think the first mod was removing this front portion of the fender. And I better introduce you to the actual project itself. It has a lot to do with the crew. We'll have the crew probably in the final video, but we're basing our subject, our T-72B1, on a vehicle in the Second Chechen War, where these tanks were heavily deployed. Not in the city environment, but we're going to use them as in the field. We won't be following this camo, but this has been one of the reference pictures that I've been looking at, and the crew that I'm going to be adding onto this has a lot to do with, you know, why I've chose a Chechnya one. So pretty good condition. The mods have been more to do with what has been omitted rather than as added on. So the first omission is this snorkel tube that is at the back of the vehicle, and the most obvious one is the omission of the rear fuel cells. Rear fuel cells rarely used, especially in Chechnya where they were operating from forward bases. They were designed for long road marches, so in our example, of course, we don't see them. Added on the unditching log out of a real piece of wood and some straps attaching it in position. I have some of these Eureka tow cables. These really are very nice in that they have a very malleable wire that will keep its form. And I've got one of them posed sort of drooping at the back there. Maybe I can sort of lift that up to show you. The other one, I'm not too sure. In that picture you may have seen, it was posed on the front glasses around here. I can't really get it to sit that well in that position. And then the other addition has been the first time I've used these. These are the T-Rex 3D printed light set for T-72B. Of note, these rear ones here can't be used. These are a different configuration to this B1. But I'm just going to sort of zoom you in to show you the detail. And I'll just show you the comparison between the kit parts. Just showing you in close-up just how beautiful, fine and delicate these 3D parts are. Exemplary, to be honest. Look absolutely amazing. I'll just show you how thick the supplied ones are. Obviously that's a limitation of plastic injection molding. If you haven't got these 3D parts, of course, you can try and thin these down. I have done that previously. They don't look so bad, but adding on these details just adds so much finesse to the appearance. And in addition to that, you get the position lights here, the marker lights, and also the rear convoy sort of light here, and also this front light here as well, all supplied within that set. As I said, the rear marker lights I had to use the kit parts, they're perfectly fine. They are quite small, so no detriment there. So that basically sums up the modifications. I suppose the only other minor thing I've done is added on bits of wiring and stuff like that. But also the supplied weather shield, the fabric material, is this rather thick vinyl stuff. So I've just replaced it with some very thin foil, actually thick foil. And we are ready for pre-shading. So pre-shading is going to be pretty much similar to what we covered in the video, in the segment where we had a look at the track area. So I'm going to use a dark base. The only difference is I'm going to modify it using some deck tan to create a mottling on top of the pattern. So let's get on with that now. Okay, so here we are, sort of jumped ahead, went straight onto the painting with one colour to create this dark green, not that weird sickly green that you see some people paint these tanks. Anyways, that is the start of things. Maybe you can see a little bit of the modelling from the pre-shade work that we did earlier. And that's when I have to leave it for this video. Obviously, next video is going to focus exclusively on weathering. There's also a little bit more paint work to do. I'll probably do that off camera, explain it to you as we commence the next video, but nothing major whatsoever. Anyways, there we are. I need to sum up the build obviously as well. This was a build video as well. Things generally go together very well on this kit, but as I mentioned, lots of parts, and take your time and you end up with something that is pretty unique, very detailed model, and certainly will look different on your display case. Anyways, we need to round this up. If you want more information on the processes, on the techniques, ask questions, join us on Patreon. We've got a growing community there. It is awesome, and I'm posting up the members' works as well. It is dirt cheap. Ask questions. join the Zoom meetings, have fun. That's what the community is about. And hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry, a bit long-winded. Hope you gained some tips from it. That's the most important thing from my point of view. And guys, see you in the next one.